Hello, and welcome to the MMA Mic Drop Podcast. This is episode number 11. My name is Jade Bunky, and I am joined by the one and only Milo McGregor. You know him on Instagram as Milo McShredder. In today's episode, we're going to provide a full preview of UFC 297, in which we provide picks and predictions for every single fight. Before we begin, let's give this card a letter grade, both in terms of our level of excitement and in terms of quality. In terms of quality, this is a pretty weak pay-per-view. The main event is sick. Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis. I think that's going to deliver. Outside of that, there's not much on offer. You should not have Chris Curtis versus Barriault on the main card for any pay-per-view. I think the prelims are pretty weak. There are still some fun fights to watch, but I would give it a letter grade of C-. And in terms of my level of excitement, I would give it a B+. And it's a B+ because that main fight, the main event, is destined to deliver. Milo, how would you pre-grade UFC 297?
I'd give it a C overall, but for just because of the main event, I think I can move it up to maybe a C+ overall, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have to look at how what the UFC is doing in its overall context, right? 297 is pretty weak, but 298 is stacked. 299 is absolutely ridiculously stacked, and then you have UFC 300, and so it is a pretty impressive run of fights the UFC will put on. But out the gate, this one is pretty anemic. But with that said, let's get into it. So first up, like I said, we have Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis. So Strickland shocked the world. He beat Israel Adesanya. When you look at his fighting style, he's a pressure boxer. He comes forward. He throws a lot of volume. He has a pretty simplistic game plan typically, but it's a game plan that works. When we look at Dricus du Plessis, he's good everywhere, and he is hyper aggressive, and he finishes fights. He is 20-2, 19 of which have come by finish. That's absolutely insane, finishing 19 of 20 fights. I think this is an interesting matchup. We will see if Sean Strickland's win against Adesanya was an aberration, or if this is indicative of what's to come. And I think it's somewhere in the middle, right? I think, Sean Strickland is an elite level talent. I mean, he beat Brendan Allen. He has good wins. His only losses recently are to Alex Pereira. And again, it's, using that I'm going to march you down approach. And he just got caught by Alex Pereira, but Alex Pereira will do that to just about anybody. He lost a close decision to Jared Cannonier. Most people thought Sean Strickland actually won that fight. So he is elite. I think Dricus du Plessis is more elite, though. I think Dricus du Plessis gets a finish, and I think it's going to be a TKO in the second round. Milo, what's your take?
I think about a month ago I would have agreed with you right there, but I don't know. I think Sean's going to do what he did to Israel and just walk him down.
Wow.
And I don't think a lot of people are going to expect that. And he's probably not going to be the favorite. So people, I don't know. I think he's going to take it home for America.
there you go. Win for America, loss for South Africa. It is a fascinating matchup. And one of the things that Sean Strickland does, he comes forward, and as the fight goes on, he gets better. And that's what's interesting. Now, the question, though, and this is, in terms of, my assessment, I don't think du Plessis gives him a chance to get comfortable because he's so aggressive. But with this said, it's one of those things that makes this fight so interesting. We have no idea what happens. I'm taking du Plessis by second round finish. Is it a decision by Strickland? Is it a knockout? What's going to happen?
Yeah, I think TKO in like the fourth or fifth round.
Okay. There you go. So it's just that accumulation of volume. All right. So next up, we have Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Bueno Silva. Now, Amanda Nunes was the queen of the division. She's abdicated her throne. This sets up a clash between these two for a vacant title fight. Stylistically, Raquel Pennington is, she likes to clinch. She likes to get in the clinch and grind. Bueno Silva is a finisher. She finishes, let's see, I think 80% of her wins have been by finish, which is pretty crazy in a women's division. And her last finish, it was overturned, so it's not an official win. Her last win, though, was against Holly Holm, and that was a standing guillotine. I can't remember exactly what type of choke that was, but it was impressive. She did it while she was standing. In this fight, I am going to give it to Bueno Silva. I think she's going to get a finish. I think it's going to be a late finish. I think it's going to be a 4th round finish. What are your thoughts?
I think I'm gonna go the opposite of you. I think I'm gonna go Raquel by decision.
Decision. Okay, yeah, and I think. Oh no, Silva's actually the favorite. I think a lot of people are taking Raquel Pennington, and it's interesting. Out of all the divisions, and this is one of the things that brings this letter grade down for the card. It's not the most compelling title fight you can make. It's maybe the most compelling one you can make at this division. But it's the weakest women's division. It's really, void of talent. It's actually probably the weakest division in terms of the overall UFC. It was a division that Amanda Nunes was, pretty much carrying by herself. It's not like, women's strawweight where you have all these, up and comers. You have a lot of talent there. It's not like, some of these other divisions that are stacked. So, for a co-main event, this one might be a little rough. It might be a lot of clinching. But we'll see. Next up, we have Neil Magny versus Mike Malott. So Mike Malott has burst onto the UFC scene with 3 wins, no losses. He looks pretty good. Neil Magny, talk about another grinder. He's 36 years old. He looks to be slowing down a bit. It's not the most exciting matchup for a pay-per-view, but I do understand why the UFC is doing it. Malott's going to be a crowd favorite in Canada. The crowd's going to be hyped. It is a step up in competition, so it is an appropriate matchup. But give me Mike Malott by decision. What do you think?
I think I'm gonna go with you on that. Mike Malott by 3rd round TKO. I think this Neil Magny looks so like I don't know, he'd not look good in the Ian Gary fight. So
yeah, and that's gonna be able to tell us a lot about Ian Gary too. Is Ian Gary really that good, or is Neil Magny a little bit washed? And I think it might be somewhere in the middle. So yeah, that's a good take. All right, next up, Chris Curtis versus Marc-Andre Barriault. This is a battle between worst nicknames in the UFC. Chris Action Man Curtis, and Barriault is Powerball, or what Power Bar, which is completely lame. And we'll get Milo's official picks, or Milo's official take on the nicknames at the end of this particular segment, as he's going to rank the top 3 and bottom 3 nicknames on this card. But I mean, it is an interesting matchup. It's just not an interesting matchup for a pay-per-view. This would be good for a main event fight night. Chris Curtis is good. I mean, he has some really good wins. I mean, he beat Brendan Allen. He beat Rodolfo Vieira. Barriault is solid as well. Chris Curtis is more boxer heavy, where Barriault is really grindy. But give me Chris Curtis by decision. What do you think?
I think I'm gonna go with you. Yeah, Chris Curtis by decision.
All right. Next up, we have Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev. Now, I think this is probably the most exciting fight on the card. This is an appropriate pay-per-view fight. And actually, in terms of just overall excitement for the fight, this should be the co-main event. I mean, it really can't be the co-main event because you do have a title fight, but I mean, this should be 3rd from the top. This is insane. I mean, Evloev is undefeated, and he's looked pretty good. Arnold Allen has looked really good. His only recent loss is Max Holloway. Max Holloway is going to do that to people, to just about everybody not named Alexander Volkanovski. Evloev is the slight favorite, but I'm going with Arnold Allen. I think Arnold Allen gets it done. This is something where I do wish it was a 5-round fight between these two to really showcase their skill set. What we saw in the Max Holloway fight, even though Arnold was losing, he was, still putting on the pressure in the third round or in later rounds. And I think Allen's going to get it done. And I'm on the line. I'm teetering between, is it going to be a finish or is it going to be a decision? I'm going to go with finish. Give me third round TKO, Arnold Allen. What do you think?
I think I'm gonna have to disagree with you. I think I'm gonna go with the majority vote with Movsar, however you say his name. I think it's gonna be a second round TKO.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay, that's interesting. We're gonna see what happens. All right, now we move into the featured prelim: Brad Katona versus Garrett Armfield. To be honest, I am completely not interested in watching either guy. I've watched Armfield fight once. I've watched Katona fight twice. Neither of these guys are very interesting fighters. I think Katona's pretty good, but it's just not an exciting matchup. Give me Katona by decision. What do you think?
Yeah, I think by decision for Katona.
All right. Next up, and this is the best fight on the prelim, and this should actually probably be on the main event: Charles Jourdain versus Sean Woodsen. Sean Woodsen, so he's 6'2". He's incredibly tall for the division. He's a really good boxer, really strong, straight strikes, very effective. I believe, let me just glance. Yeah, he's 10-1. Charles Jourdain is 15-6, but he looks like he's really coming into form right now. He's looked really good recently. He's only 28 years old, and I'm just looking up to see how many finishes, because I believe he has a lot of finishes. Yeah, he has 13 of his 15 wins have come by finish. This is an exciting matchup. I mean, this is a really, really good prelim. Give me Charles Jourdain by third round submission.
I'm gonna go Charles Jourdain by decision.
Awesome. Any reason why?
No.
All right. As I said, this fight card is, this pay-per-view, even the prelims it's pretty weak, and it looks like Milo's just not that interested in some of the prelims, but I know he's fired up on the main event. All right, next up, now we have an interesting fight here, and I'm just going to look over to make sure I pronounce his name correctly. It's Serhi Sidi versus Ramon Tavares. Now, interestingly, both of these fighters have already fought. Sidi won by first round stoppage on the Contender Series, but when you watch that stoppage, Tavares got screwed. He got knocked down, but he was not even close to being out. So Dana White invited him back onto the Contender Series, and Tavares looked good. I mean, I watched that fight. I think he knocked the guy down 3 times. He finished him. I mean, he was very aggressive, looked really polished, and I'm going to take Tavares by second round knockout, despite having a loss on his record to the same guy previously. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to go first round knockout, though, for Tavares.
Really? Okay, so 2 for Tavares. All right, next up, we have Jillian Robertson versus Poliana Viana. Robertson, she has some good grappling skills. Not too interesting of a fighter to really watch. Again, this is another lackluster fight on this particular card. Give me Viana by decision.
I'm gonna go with Gillian just because of her nickname. It's the Savage.
All right, so she's gonna get it done. Is she gonna get it done by, you said decision?
Yeah, actually I didn't, but yeah, decision.
By decision. All right. Next up, we have Johan Lainez versus Sam Patterson. So Sam Patterson's interesting. He is absolutely massive for the weight class. He's 6'4", and let's see. I'm just gonna click on his record right here. Another bad nickname, the Future. He has a lot of finishes, and he's moving up in weight. Think about this: a 6'4" lightweight. That's absolutely insane. But he has a big target, and he holds his head straight up in the air. And in his last fight at lightweight, he got absolutely destroyed. And I think that's going to happen again. Lainez has, some pretty good power. And I just think Sam Patterson is so hittable. He got knocked out at lightweight. He's moving up a weight class. I think he's going to get knocked out again. I don't know if it's going to happen in the first round. Give me Lainez by second round knockout.
I'm going to go Lainez by third round knockout.
Third round knockout. All right. I know Milo likes the knockouts. That's what you want to see. All right. Next up, and this is a pretty interesting fight: Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Priscilla Cachoeira. Jasmine is good. I mean, she's really good. I mean, she's 3-2 in the UFC, but her 2 losses, came against Tracy Cortez, and let me just look up the other loss. I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, Natalia Silva, who is a really hot prospect, but she has looked really good. Cachoeira is probably the dirtiest fighter in the UFC. Milo, I don't know if you saw this, but she was getting choked out, and she tried to eye gouge her opponent. Yeah, she probably should have been booted from the UFC, but instead of fighting the hands, she was fighting the eye. It was pretty disgusting. She's also a little bit older. She's 35. Give me Jasmine by third round submission. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you in that round submission. But this girl's Priscilla's nickname is Zombie Girl, so I think she deserves to lose because of that.
Deserves to lose. So not because she's a dirty fighter, but she has a lame nickname.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, next up we have Malcolm Gordon versus Jimmy Flick. Now, Jimmy Flick, he came into the UFC. He had this crazy submission against Cody Durden, and he looked good, and then he retired. Took a couple years off, came back, been knocked out promptly in his last 2 fights. And it may have just been one of those things where, he just got the submission of his life and looked better than he actually was. But it's hard for me to take somebody who retires after their first win in the UFC and then gets smashed a couple years later in back-to-back fights. Give me Malcolm Gordon by decision. What do you think?
I'm going to go Jimmy Flick by submission.
Wow. All right. You don't think he's washed yet.
His name's super sick, too. His name's